If you went to a doctor for a skin condition, right, and they told you the cure was to step into a radiation cabinet that carries a long-term cancer risk, you'd probably run out of the clinic.
Oh, absolutely.
Or if they told you the secret to a youthful complexion was to literally vaporize your face to the point where it oozes and crusts for 2 weeks, you'd think they were out of their
It
minds.
sounds totally barbaric when you phrase it like that. I mean, it really does.
But today, that's exactly what modern medicine is prescribing.
Yeah, and there's profound logic to it, actually. We spend so much time fiercely protecting our biological barriers, yet some of our most effective medical treatments involve deliberately destroying or suppressing those very same defenses.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating stack of sources for you. We've got clinical dermatology guidelines on laser resurfacing and narrowband UVB phototherapy.
Right, and we're also looking at some critical regulatory updates for UK medical devices and cosmetics.
Yeah, and finally, we're diving into NHS safety protocols regarding a frankly terrifying condition, which is sepsis.
I know on the surface, that looks like a totally random assortment of medical documents,
Right.
but there is a really powerful through line connecting them all. We're looking at the extreme tightrope modern medicine walks. So balancing the highly regulated intentional damage we inflict on our bodies.
Right, against the catastrophic emergencies that trigger when our natural barriers actually fail.
Exactly.
So buckle up. We're going to uncover why dermatologists are embracing the UV rays we've been told our whole lives to avoid, how the UK narrowly dodged a medical device Wild West, and why an official clinical symptom of a deadly infection is simply feeling like you might die.
Let's start at the literal surface of the issue, right? The skin.
Yes, so looking at these guidelines from the British Cosmetic Dermatology Group in Midland Skin, we're diving into the wild world of laser resurfacing.
It really is wild.
We're talking about intentionally using concentrated light to breach the body's primary fortress wall.
Yeah, and to really grasp this, we need to understand the mechanism. Because lasers don't just magically erase wrinkles like a digital airbrush.
Like, not Photoshop.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They cause a highly controlled, incredibly specific thermal injury. So the light from a resurfacing laser specifically targets the water inside your skin cells.
Okay.
It heats that water so fast that the cell essentially just vaporizes.
Which brings us to the two, I guess, heavy hitters in this space. Fully ablative and fractional lasers, which typically use CO2 or erbium technology.
Exactly.
Let's look at fully ablative first, because the sources say this removes the entire surface layer of the skin, the epidermis, plus a measured portion of the dermis underneath.
Yeah, it's essentially the nuclear option for skin rejuvenation.
Yeah.
Dermatologists use it for deep etched-in wrinkles or severe sun damage or extensive acne scarring.
Right.
Because you're stripping away the entire top layer, the results are dramatic. But the biological cost is just a brutal recovery.
Yeah, the recovery sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. The Midland Skin source mentions it takes 10 to 12 days just to grow a fragile new layer of surface skin.
Yeah.
And during that time, your face is raw, oozing, and crusting. And then the redness can linger for 3 to 6 months.
It's intense.
I really have to push back here. Like, patients are willingly paying thousands of dollars for this just for cosmetic reasons. I mean, does the payoff really justify the massive infection risk of entirely removing your skin's primary barrier?
Well, that really highlights the psychology of aesthetics, doesn't it? The payoff is profound specifically because of how the body reacts to that trauma.
Okay, how so?
By vaporizing the damaged tissue, you trigger the body's emergency wound healing cascade. So these specialized cells called fibroblasts, they just rush to the injury site.
Right.
And they start producing massive amounts of fresh, tightly organized collagen and elastin. For someone with severe disfiguring scars, the psychological benefit of that brand new, smoother skin just outweighs 2 weeks of oozing.
Wow. But there's a catch, isn't there? Because this fully ablative method is generally only considered safe for people with lighter skin. Specifically, I think it's Fitzpatrick types I and II.
That's a really critical limitation, yeah. The Fitzpatrick scale measures how skin responds to UV light, essentially categorizing skin tones.
Right.
In darker skin tones, the Fitzpatrick III, and above the melanocytes, which are the cells that produce pigment, are much more active.
Okay, so if you hit them with a laser.
Yeah, if you hit them with the massive thermal trauma of a fully ablative laser, they can totally overreact. This causes post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation.
Oh, meaning the patient could be left with permanent dark patches.
Exactly.
And that's exactly why fractional lasers were developed, right? Like
Yeah.
instead of vaporizing the entire surface, a fractional laser targets microscopic columns of skin.
Yes.
I'm kind of visualizing this like a home renovation, actually.
Oh, okay.
Like fully ablative is like completely bulldozing a house to pour a brand new
Yeah.
foundation. But fractional is like drilling a tight grid of holes into the walls to inject new insulation while leaving the drywall mostly intact.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Those intact areas of drywall are everything here.
Because they help you heal.
Exactly. The fractional laser leaves bridges of completely healthy, untouched skin between the microscopic laser columns. And those intact bridges act as a reservoir of healthy stem cells and melanocytes.
Oh, I see.
So they rapidly speed up the healing process from the sides of the wound.
So the recovery drops down to maybe 5 to 9 days, and the risk of massive infection just plummets.
Significantly, yeah.
Plus, it opens the door for treating darker skin types, up to Fitzpatrick V, because you aren't triggering such a massive, uncontrolled inflammatory response across the entire face.
Precisely. Now, you might need 3 or 4 fractional sessions spaced weeks apart to get the same results as one fully ablative session.
Sure.
But for a lot of patients, avoiding a 2-week oozing recovery is entirely worth a trade-off.
Yeah, I'd take that trade-off. Now, there's another totally different type of laser mentioned in the Harley Street Dermatology Clinic source, the pulsed dye laser or vascular laser.
Right, yes.
And this one isn't about vaporizing water in the skin at all. It targets blood vessels for conditions like rosacea, port wine stains, or spider veins.
This one is just fascinating. It relies on a principle called selective photothermolysis.
Okay, let's unpack that term for a second.
Sure. So photo means light, therma means heat, and lysis means destruction. The pulsed dye laser emits a very specific wavelength of yellow light,
Okay.
and that light passes right through the outer layers of the skin without doing anything at all. But it is intensely absorbed by hemoglobin, which is the red pigment in your blood.
So the light basically ignores the skin cells, hits the red blood cell, and converts to heat in a tiny fraction of a second.
Exactly. It basically cooks the abnormal blood vessel from the inside out while leaving the tissue right next door completely untouched. Your body then just naturally absorbs the destroyed vessel debris over a few weeks. It's like the ultimate biological sniper rifle. Surgical precision without a single cut.
That's incredible. So we're using intense targeted light to intentionally cause localized destruction?
Yes.
But if we pivot to our next source, things get even more counterintuitive.
Oh, definitely.
We've got the 2022 guidelines from the British Association of Dermatologists on narrowband UVB phototherapy. Here, we're using light not to destroy tissue, but to manipulate the immune system.
It's a major paradigm shift in how we think about radiation.
I have to admit, I'm genuinely confused by this one, and I'm sure you at home are too. We've been drilled our entire lives to slather on sunscreen, wear hats, avoid UV rays to prevent skin cancer.
Right.
But dermatologists are taking people with severe skin conditions, putting them into literal light cabinets, and blasting them with UVB radiation. How does that make any sense?
It feels completely contradictory until you break down what natural sunlight actually is. The sun hits us with a broad spectrum blast of UVA, UVB, and visible light. That broad spectrum causes generalized DNA damage, which, leads to cancer and aging.
Right.
But in the 1980s, scientists discovered that you don't need the whole spectrum to treat immune-mediated skin diseases.
The guidelines specify narrowband UVB, which peaks precisely around 311 to 313 nanometers.
Yes. By isolating just that tiny specific sliver of the light spectrum, dermatologists discovered they could maximize the immunomodulatory benefits.
While reducing the risks.
Exactly, while dramatically reducing the broad-spectrum carcinogenic risks of natural sunlight or, like, old-school tanning beds.
And the medical benefits are huge. The guidelines recommend this as a frontline treatment for psoriasis, severe eczema, and vitiligo.
Yeah.
They use this before resorting to heavy systemic immunosuppressant pills, which can cause liver damage or widespread infections. But how does shining a 3 and 11 nanometer light on your skin actually stop eczema?
Well, conditions like psoriasis and severe eczema are essentially the local immune system throwing a massive temper tantrum.
Okay, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, overactive T cells in the skin cause rapid cell turnover, severe inflammation, and intense itching. The narrowband UVB penetrates the skin and induces something called apoptosis.
Apoptosis. Wait, that's programmed cell death, right?
Exactly that. It doesn't just nuke the area, it triggers a mechanism that tells those specific hyperactive inflammatory T cells to quietly dismantle themselves and die off.
Wow.
It clears out the rogue cells, and at the same time, it's highly antipyretic, meaning it biologically turns down the nerve pathways that transmit the sensation of itch.
But even with that precision, the guidelines make it clear they do not take this lightly. You can't just casually walk into a clinic and hop in a light box.
No, no, no.
The safety protocols are intense. They mandate starting with a minimal erythema dose test, or MED test.
Yeah, so they test a tiny grid on your skin with varying doses of UV to find the exact threshold where your skin just begins to turn pink.
Oh, to find your limit.
That way they know your personal burning point and can calibrate the machine to stay safely below it.
The protective gear is also non-negotiable. You have to wear specialized UV-blocking goggles during every single treatment. The sources explain that chronic UVB exposure to the eyes can cause photokeratitis, which is literally a sunburn on your cornea.
Yeah, ouch.
And over the long term, it severely accelerates cataracts.
And it extends beyond the eyes, too.
Yeah.
The BAD guidelines specifically mandate shielding male genitalia during treatment, noting that darker, tightly woven polyester is the most effective material.
Right.
The skin there is incredibly thin and susceptible, and unshielded exposure carries a documented risk of genital tumors.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, right? Cancer risk.
Yeah.
Narrowband UVB is safer than broad-spectrum light, but it's not risk-free. The guidelines state that once a patient exceeds 500 whole-body treatments over their lifetime, it triggers mandatory regular skin cancer surveillance.
We're walking an incredibly fine line here. We're vaporizing skin to force it to rebuild, and we're radiating skin to force immune cells to die.
Yeah.
That level of controlled danger requires a massive invisible safety net to prevent absolute chaos.
Which transitions us perfectly to our regulatory sources. Because you can't just hand a clinic a radiation box and a water vaporizing laser and say, good luck.
Right, definitely not.
The British Medical Laser Association requires anyone operating a laser to take a 3-hour core of knowledge safety training every 5 years, covering physics, tissue interaction, and emergency protocols.
Essential stuff.
But looking at the broader UK regulatory landscape, it seems like that entire safety net was about to collapse.
Oh, you're referring to the UK Medical Devices Amendment Regulations of 2025.
Yeah.
This was a literal cliff edge for the entire healthcare system.
Yeah, following Brexit, the UK had to untangle its medical device laws from the European Union. But many of the retained EU laws governing device safety were legally set to just expire and vanish on May 26, 2025.
Right.
Let me use another analogy. It's like the UK is building a brand new, highly advanced traffic intersection for their new regulatory framework, but it won't be ready until 2026 or 2027. However, the old EU traffic lights were legally programmed to just switch off in May 2025.
That is exactly what was happening. If this amendment hadn't passed, cars would have just started smashing into each other.
Right.
Without a legal framework, the entire medical device supply chain would have effectively become illegal to operate.
Yeah.
And we aren't just talking about aesthetic lasers here. We're talking about pacemakers, surgical tools, diagnostic equipment.
So, to stop the crash, the UK government passed this 2025 amendment to retain 4 crucial pieces of EU law to basically bridge the gap.
Yeah.
For example, they kept the common technical specifications for in vitro diagnostics, or IVDs.
Think about the real-world impact of that, right? IVDs are things like blood tests, biopsies, genetic screening tools.
Yeah.
If the regulations governing their safety standards evaporated, hospitals wouldn't legally be able to trust or use the tests diagnosing cancer or infectious diseases.
Wow. They also retained the rules allowing electronic instructions for use, which, sounds boring, but if they hadn't, manufacturers would have been legally forced to print millions of pages of paper manuals for every single device.
Yeah, creating a massive logistical bottleneck.
Exactly. And they kept safety standards for devices using animal tissues, like certain heart valves. And crucially, they retained the oversight powers of the approved bodies.
Right, the independent organizations that actually audit and certify that these devices are safe to use on humans. Regulatory continuity is really the invisible infrastructure of healthcare.
Yeah.
If you invent the greatest life-saving laser in the world, it never reaches a patient if there's no legal framework to certify it.
And this intense oversight extends to what we put on our skin, too. I want you at home to go check your bathroom cabinet later, because the UK's Scientific Advisory Group on Chemical Safety, or SAGCS, released new limits in 2024 for cosmetics.
Yeah, they're constantly evaluating the toxicology of consumer products to find the exact mathematical threshold where a chemical goes from being helpful to hazardous.
Take kojic acid, for example.
Hmm.
It's a hugely popular ingredient used for skin brightening. Under the new rules, it is strictly capped at a 1% concentration, and it's only permitted for use on the face and hands.
Right.
Why the strict 1% limit? Like, what happens if a manufacturer puts in 2% or 3% to make it work faster?
Well, kojic acid works by inhibiting tyrosinase, which is an enzyme your body needs to produce melanin, but it's also a known skin sensitizer.
Okay.
If the concentration gets too high, it doesn't just brighten the skin, it actually provokes the immune system. Your body starts treating the kojic acid like a toxic invader, leading to severe contact dermatitis.
Yikes.
Yeah, you can develop a permanent allergy to the product. Plus, at higher concentrations, there's a risk of it absorbing systemically into the bloodstream, where it could potentially act as an endocrine disruptor.
Wow. They also cracked down on a preservative called BHT, capping it at 0.8% in most products, and limited certain UV filters like benzophenone 3 to 6% in face creams.
BHT is an antioxidant that stops your creams from going rancid. But again, in high doses, animal studies show it can cause liver and kidney enlargement.
So the dose makes the poison.
Exactly. By capping it at 0.8%, regulators ensure that even if you apply that cream every single day for years, the systemic accumulation in your body stays well below the danger zone.
So we've got these incredible tools, right? Lasers, UV cabinets, chemical compounds, and we've got this massive bureaucratic safety net ensuring they're calibrated perfectly so they heal us instead of harming us.
Yeah.
But nature doesn't read our regulations. What happens when that safety net fails? When a regulated wound gets infected or a suppressed immune system lets a rogue bacteria slip past the gates?
Well, that brings us to our final source, the NHS and Hull University Teaching Hospital safety netting advice for sepsis.
Right.
Sepsis is what happens when localized damage spirals into ultimate systemic failure.
The NHS defines it as a life-threatening reaction to an infection, but the really scary part is that it's not the bacteria or the virus that kills you, it's your own body.
Yeah, the immune system essentially goes rogue. Usually, if you get a cut, white blood cells rush to the area, cause a little localized swelling, and fight off the invader.
Thermal response.
Right. But in sepsis, that local response explodes into a systemic cytokine storm. The immune system overreacts so violently that it starts attacking the body's own organs and tissues.
And looking at the risk factors listed by the Hull Trust, you can see how this connects directly back to our earlier topics. Who is at risk? Anyone with a compromised immune system.
Right. Perhaps someone undergoing extensive UV phototherapy.
Exactly. Anyone with broken skin, like a patient recovering from fully ablative laser resurfacing. The very treatments designed to heal us can inadvertently open the gates for sepsis.
And if it's not caught rapidly, sepsis progresses to septic shock.
What happens then?
The blood vessels dilate massively and become leaky, trying to let white blood cells out to fight the infection. But this causes a catastrophic drop in blood pressure.
Oh, wow.
Your vital organs, your brain, your heart, your kidneys are starved of oxygen and begin to shut down.
The NHS divides the warning signs into amber flags and red flags. Let's look at the amber flags first. One of them is not passing urine in 12 hours.
Yeah.
But the red flag, meaning call 999 immediately, is 18 hours with no urine. Why is urine output such a critical metric for a blood infection?
It's a direct mechanical indicator of your dropping blood pressure. As pressure plummets, the body goes into survival mode.
Right.
It shunts all available blood away from the extremities and non-essential organs.
Just to keep you alive.
Right, redirecting it to protect the heart and the brain.
Yeah.
The kidneys are sacrificed. Without blood pressure driving fluid through them, urine production completely halts.
That's terrifying. Other red flags include severe breathlessness, so 25 breaths or more a minute at rest. A resting pulse over 120 beats per minute as the heart desperately tries to pump what little pressure is left.
Yeah.
Or skin that is very pale, mottled, or blue. Though the guidelines crucially point out this mottling can be much harder to see on darker skin tones, so you cannot rely on skin color alone.
Any altered mental state is also a major red flag. Sudden confusion, severe drowsiness, or slurred speech. That's literally the brain screaming that it's suffocating from a lack of oxygen.
When you hit those red flags, the medical response has to be violently fast. Time is tissue.
Absolutely. They initiate the sepsis 6 protocol within the hour, so they push high-dose, broad-spectrum IV antibiotics.
Right.
They blast the patient with IV fluids to physically force the blood pressure back up.
And oxygen.
Yes, they provide oxygen. And sometimes surgeons have to go in and physically cut out the source of the infection, like an abscess.
But out of all the metrics, the blood pressure cuffs, the pulse oximeters, the urine output, there is one symptom on the NHS red flag list that really stopped me in my tracks.
Which one?
The symptom is officially listed as, quote, feeling extremely unwell, like I might die.
Ah, the feeling of impending doom.
Wait, how is feeling like I might die an official clinical symptom? Isn't that just a panic attack from being really sick? How does a doctor even chart that?
It's easy to dismiss it as panic, but it's actually a profound display of biological intuition.
Really?
Yes, your conscious brain is deeply connected to your internal physiology. Before your blood pressure drops low enough to trigger the monitor's alarm, your brain's internal sensors are tracking subtle shifts in blood pH, oxygen tension, and the flood of inflammatory chemicals.
So the brain detects the systemic collapse before the machines do.
Yes. The brain translates that massive, complex physiological dysregulation into an overwhelming, primitive, cognitive signal of dread. It's your body pulling the ultimate fire alarm.
Wow.
Clinicians are explicitly taught to treat the statement, "I feel like I am going to die," as a literal, measurable vital sign. If a patient says it, you act.
That is deeply chilling, but also incredibly empowering for you as a patient. If you ever feel that specific sense of impending doom, you don't politely wait to see how you feel in the morning. You call 999.
You have to trust your biology.
Let's take a breath and look at the journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the brutal precision of aesthetic lasers, using targeted heat to vaporize our skin and force it to rebuild.
Yeah, and we stepped into UV radiation cabinets, leveraging incredibly specific wavelengths of light to selectively kill off rogue immune cells.
We explored the invisible bureaucratic safety nets, the UK device regulations preventing a supply chain collapse, and the cosmetic chemical caps keeping toxic thresholds in check.
We rely on those rules to ensure our powerful tools heal rather than harm.
And finally, we looked at the devastating reality of sepsis, where a single localized breach can trigger an immune overreaction that collapses the entire human machine.
It's a sobering reminder of our fundamental fragility.
It really is, and it leaves you wondering about the future. We spend our lives wrapped in medical regulations, relying on calibrated lasers and highly engineered chemicals. We're currently developing incredibly sophisticated wearable tech, right? Smartwatches that track our heart rate, our blood oxygen, our temperature in real time.
Oh yeah, absolutely everywhere now.
But as we outsource more and more of our health monitoring to digital screens and algorithms, will we eventually lose touch with that profound biological intuition? If we're trained to only trust a smartwatch's data, will we eventually stop listening to our own internal alarms?
That's a great question.
Will we ignore the feeling of impending doom just because our digital app says our vitals are fine? It's something to think about the next time you check your wrist instead of checking in with yourself.